Pira tease again. We will need the yoga mat.
Soon.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. My name is Faye. This is Live with Faye. One of the things that's been trending on Twitter and other social media for a while is the Uttar Pradesh government's new population bill draft. Now, a couple of things we must be very clear about it. This is a draft. This is not the final law. And it's a draft that has been put in the public domain for suggestions. We have until the 19th of July, which is not a very long time, but until the 19th of July to read through this draft as ordinary citizens and give suggestions to the government of Uttar Pradesh on whether or not you think it's a good idea. Now, it's also sparked a sort of comments from the opposition and things like which we're not going to get into because that's the political side of it. But it's very important to discuss what's in this draft because a lot of people are turning around and saying, hey, that's a good idea. We should do that as well. That seems like the right thing to do. And we need to figure out if it really is the right thing to do. Does data support this? Does the law of the land support it? Does our constitution, so our fundamental rights of equality and livelihood, is this flying in the face of our fundamental rights? These are the questions that we're going to ask today. Joining me this evening, Poonam, Muttreja, Executive Director of the Population Foundation of India, my go-to voice when it comes to matters of population. So I'm very glad we actually pushed the conversation by a day to make sure she's available. We have Professor Dipa Sinha, who is a professor at Ambedkar University, very articulate, has been arguing these points as well. I'm very glad to have her join this conversation. We have Ms. Geeta, Luthra, Senior Advocate of the Supreme Court, joining us, and we'll go to her for matters of constitution and matters of fundamental rights. We have Mr. Narendra Taneja, who is a national spokesperson of the BJP, bringing in the point of view of the party. And Mr. Taneja, I'm really interested to know if other state governments, also from the BJP, are likely to pick this up as well. And Sanjoy Ghose, who is a labor law advocate and a specialist. And there's a very specific reason why we've invited Mr. Ghose, because there are implications on whether you can get a government job, whether you can get a promotion. And I want to understand how the labor law actually reconciles with what's in this draft. All right, so part of my job is that I have to read through these documents. I have done that. I've broken it down for you. Let me take you through this very quickly, right? So it starts off with saying that the government of Uttar Pradesh has limited resources, but it needs to be able to provide, it has to look after all of its citizens. And in order to do that, it wants to incentivize the two-child norm. So it's not calling it a policy, it's calling it a norm. It also, incidentally, in the second paragraph, defines how polygamy will be treated under this law. Basically says that if there is a polygamous relationship, the one man, all of the children will account as only two children under this law. So this is what it says. If a family has stopped at two children through voluntary sterilization of one of the two partners, the individual, if he works for the government, will get 2 additional increments, which is 2 additional promotions, subsidy on the plot of or a house, loan for a house, rebates on water bill, power bill, house tax, also maternity and paternity leave of 12 months, which is amazing because the private sector doesn't give that, 3% increase in PF in the employer's contribution, health insurance, for public servants who stop after 1 child and then volunteer for a sterilization for either one partner, 2 additional increments, apart from the 2 that I already talked about, free healthcare for the child. This is interesting. Admission preference in IIM and AIMS for that one child, although both IIMs and AIMS are not in Uttar Pradesh, so I don't know how that's going to work out. Free schooling and college till graduation for that one child, scholarship for girls, and preference in government jobs for families that only have 1 child. One of the things that actually worried me a great deal is that it also limits the number of children you can adopt. You cannot adopt more than 2 children. So if you have 1 child, you can only adopt 1 more. which doesn't really solve the population problem because those children already exist and could use a good home. It also spells out very clearly, Poonamji, the policy on twins. So if you already have twins and then you go and have one more child, then you are out of the system. But if you have one child and then you have twins, then that's okay, apparently. Now, if you have more than 2 children, now up to now I called out the carrot, here's the stick. If you have more than 2 children after this law is brought in, and this is important, it's not retrospective, after the law is brought in, these are the things you will be cut out of. No welfare schemes of the government, only 4 ration cards per family, no panchayat elections, you cannot be a candidate, you will be ineligible for government jobs, you will be ineligible for promotions if you happen to already have a government job, and you will not get any government subsidy. So I'm assuming this is fertilizer, this is all of the things that this will impact the farm sector a great deal as well. So this is where we are. And the questions we're asking, does it pass legal muster? Is it in violation of any fundamental rights? Does it fit into our labor laws? And what is the general idea? So we're going to go straight to our panelists at this point. But first, if I may please bring in Mr. Narendra Taneja. Mr. Taneja, good evening and thank you for giving us your time.
Good evening.
Is this bill right now, the way it is designed, is this the official stand of the BJP nationally, or is this something that's only being considered in Uttar Pradesh?
We are a union of states, which means that, state governments, they are within their rights to launch their own initiative. Whether you are a BJP, you may be BJP, but BJP in Uttar Pradesh is elected by the people, and they basically are accountable and responsible to the people of Uttar Pradesh. And that doesn't necessarily mean that what they are doing. So BJP governments in other states are, expected to follow them. And there is a separate unit of BJP. It's in the government elected for the people of Uttar Pradesh, and they make their own laws. They have their own visions. They have their own ideas, their own directions. So that's how democracy functions, a union of states. And so what they do in Uttar Pradesh, for instance, is for the people and the government of Uttar Pradesh to decide. But as far as the central leadership is concerned, it's not that the central is giving any direction to them and so on and so forth.
I'm sorry, forgive me. Let me rephrase the question. So you're saying the Uttar Pradesh government is an independent state and has the right to make its own laws, which you're absolutely right about. Do the rest of the state governments in the BJP, or do the leaders of the BJP think this is a good idea? Do you believe in the 2-child norm? What is the party's official stand with the 2-child norm?
Our line is clear. When it comes to is population growth is an issue in India? Yes, absolutely it is. Should we do something about it? Yes, most people think that we should do something about it. And we think more in terms of population management than population control. There is a difference. For instance, we have parts of India and some states, for instance, where population growth is not a challenge, is not an issue. They're part of India. In some places, we may even have a government there, but population growth is, for instance, not a challenge there. But when you look at states like Uttar Pradesh, limited area, but the population is like 220 million, which is more than a big country like Brazil, and it's a rather impoverished state, and they have huge challenges, and they are allowed under the constitution also and democratic norms that we follow in this country. They want to come up with their own ideas, their own solutions. It's put on the on the table for people to comment and so on and so forth. It's for the people of Uttar Pradesh and the government of Uttar Pradesh. Yes, they are BJP government, but they are not working under any central command as far as these issues are concerned. We respect the constitutional provision that we are a union of states, and respective state governments, they are quite free to launch their own initiatives.
Mr. Taneja, a political question for you, if I may. Is this bill being placed before the people simply with the eye on the elections that are coming up in Uttar Pradesh, and also to tell the people of Uttar Pradesh that the reason why we've not been able to deliver development to you is the population, and that's happening because of a certain community? Is that the real intention behind this bill?
I wouldn't say so. You see, election time, you have either local election or some other elections or parliamentary elections. We had parliamentary elections just 2 years ago. In Uttar Pradesh, they send the maximum number of members of parliament. We just had local elections there, as you may have noticed in the newspaper. Now, so elections come and go. But I think important thing is that you really want, I mean, people in BJP, we do wonder. UP is my home state. I was born and brought up there. I spent first 19 years of my life in Uttar Pradesh. So I know Uttar Pradesh reality, you know, ground reality is very well. Population is a challenge. Unemployment is a challenge there. The fact that there's so many poor people is a challenge. How do we generate jobs for them? There are many other issues. So we've got to do something about it, management. Now, the question is that, you know, the government there, they have come out with their own ideas. The draft is on the table for consultations. And you and me and many others may have a different ideas. But the point is, this is what they've launched. And let's see what comes out of it and what people of Uttar Pradesh.
Okay.
But nothing to do with the election. Any democratic government at the end of the day makes some promises and they have to try to deliver them. We are a democracy elected by the people. So every issue in a democracy is an election issue and no issue is an election issue. But Uttar Pradesh has challenges and they're trying basically to meet this challenge, which population management in a state like Uttar Pradesh, the same goes for Bihar, is a very big challenge.
Professor Dipa Sinha, do you agree that population in Uttar Pradesh, Bihar is a very big challenge and the two-child norm is the way to tackle it?
See, firstly, it is true that the UP has a large population, but what we have to understand is the difference between absolute population and population growth, right? And if you look at population growth rates, that in India has been declining for a long time now, and many states have reached what we call a replacement level, which is that each couple is having about 2 children. So the population will not grow, it's stabilized. UP has a higher fertility rate, it's about 2.7. But even in Uttar Pradesh, the trend is one which is declining. So if you look at the National Family Health Survey, which was done in 2005, the fertility rate was 3.8, which is on an average woman has about 3.8 children. And it came down to 2.7 in 2015. And it's a declining trend. And you see that as development happens, as women are more educated, as you have greater access to health services, fertility rate does come down. So it is something that has been happening in the right direction. And if we improved services even more faster and increase the status of women, especially improving their higher education, population stabilizes. That has been the experience across India as well as across the world. So I think firstly, currently this kind of a policy is not the need of the hour at all. I mean, we are not facing a population explosion in Uttar Pradesh that you need this kind of a stringent action to be taken. So it's a bit of a non-issue, and therefore also I think the response, because you don't know where it's coming from.
Poonamji, do you agree that we don't know where it's coming from?
And I don't indulge in political analysis on television or in programs, and we are not qualified, unlike the others and Mr. Taneja and so on. But I would like to say it's not coming from data. It's not coming from evidence. It's not coming from the need of the women who who desire to have fewer children. The unmet need of their contraception is the second highest in the countries in UP. There is a northeastern state, I forget the state, which has 23% unmet need. Next comes UP, 18.1%. So the 220 million people if you calculate for UP, which is a large state, 18%, forget the 0.1. The number of children who are unwanted, and no child should ever be unwanted, is contributing to a population, I will not say explosion, undesired fertility. And I want to repeat, no child should be undesired, and no woman should have the situation where she is not able to meet her fertility needs and should have to go through abortions, and children who she can ill afford to feed, look after, and her own body can ill afford to take. Second, the reason UP doesn't need a population control bill is because it has just released a fantastic population policy on Sunday, which I've read from cover to cover. It is fantastic, and every statement made by the Chief Minister of UP fits in with the right thing to do. So this parallel process of having this bill and not putting it in the population policy, I'm very happy it hasn't, is something that's a bit of a googly for me to understand. All right. I think I normally crack things, but this I'm not being able to crack. And maybe Mr. Taneja can help us plan. Third, one
Yes.
small point. You know, there's the data that Dipa rightly gave was in NFHS 4, the fertility rates are 2.7. But our estimation for NFHS 5, which unfortunately haven't come out for UP because of the delay in tsunami, it is likely to be close to 2.3 or 2.4. And finally, there's a technical group on population for the period 2011 that the projections that the Health Ministry set up, Nirman Bhavan, and according to them, the TFR, the best news for UP is that their TFR will be 2.1 in 2025. And if they invest in women's literacy, family planning services, all the good things that are there in their population policy, they might even make it less than 2.1. I have great hopes in UP as long as we all ensure that we demand that this bill should be thrown in the dustbin.
All right. So very clearly, I think Professor Dipa Sinha and Poonam Muttreja telling us that the data does not support a two-child policy. What it supports instead is to empower and educate women. And every time that has happened, we have had good results in terms of population. Now to look at the details of this bill, I bring in the lawyers, Ms. Geeta, Luthra, and Mr. Sanjoy Ghose. Ms. Luthra, you first. The idea that I cannot get a government job, I cannot contest elections, I will not get a promotion, I don't have access to subsidy. Is this in violation of fundamental rights? You're on mute, Ms. Luthra, you'll have to unmute, please.
So my view is that yes, there will be aspects of this bill which would pass muster in a court. There would be aspects. Aspects of disincentives I can understand may pass muster in a court because the government's policy may be seen not as something which may be the only way to get a desirable result, may be something which may pass muster. But to take away subsidies, to try and disincentivize education, all these aspects would also fall foul with regard to laws relating to the child. Ultimately, a child is an individual. That child has rights. Why should that child be discriminated? So there are many, many problems that I see with it. I can see a problem for a woman, because a man is saying polygamous marriage. This lady, if she has a right to marry, then she has a right to have progeny. She has a right to procreate. You can't be restricting her right. Ultimately, the desire of a human being to procreate is something which is natural, is part of their reproductive rights, are part and parcel of their fundamental right to live. So there are many aspects, and that's why I'm glad that objections have been invited. It's also very unusual that about 5 or 6 public interest litigations have been filed in the Supreme Court, one which has been thrown out, which is promoting the two-child policy. So I'm very surprised that suddenly PILs are appearing on the same stage as what this proposed bill is. So clearly there is a view to try and bring about public opinion or social opinion in terms of this bill. But then I tried to see when Sanjay Gandhi's time, when he had said, and that was drastic, if we recall, that you have population control, you have forcible sterilization.
Yes.
And I said that at that time, the environment was not even there to challenge something like this. But now the environment, thankfully, is there. So there will be major portions. But to answer the question, and this I have to test out by thinking a little more about it. But to test it, that if you create disincentives in government jobs, because that's the only one which you can create a disincentive, that you don't give the same incentive to a person who has 2 children and give more than 2 children, and give that incentive in terms of subsidies to a person who has 2 and below, is something which I believe could pass muster in a court. I mean, just totally speaking legally.
Okay, let me take that to Mr. Sanjay Ghosh as well. Mr. Ghosh, here are the questions. Do you think, in your opinion, this is violative of fundamental rights in any way? Will it pass muster in a court of law? And is it violative of labor laws? How can you say we will give you 2 extra increments or 4 extra increments if you have only 1 child? You will not be eligible to apply. If you have applied, you will not get promotions. Things like that. Is that valid in your point of view?
Thank you, Faye, for having me. I partly agree with Ms. Luthra, and this is it's an abnormal situation when you have 2 lawyers and they agree. But I partly disagree with her also. I think very few aspects of this bill, if made into law, should pass muster. Now, what actually happens in courts these days, all of you know. But if we go by our traditional wisdom, then obviously there are various problematic aspects of this bill. If I may just quickly cite a few of them.
Please.
Now, firstly, for example, our esteemed guests who are population studies experts said, the focus of policy has to be in empowerment of the women. It is to be able to secure the reproductive rights of women. It is to be able to control population through encouragement of literacy and awareness. Instead of that, what is being done is we are having a system of coercion being put in place. Now, so far as I will deal with these coercions in 2 aspects, but before that, one important point, it says about the fact that a man can get a promotion and incentives if the spouse also sterilizes. So let's also keep in mind the unequal bargaining power of the lady in a marriage. You may have a situation where an unscrupulous man may force his wife to sterilize only to get these benefits. So again, where is the question of the reproductive rights of the women?
Yes.
Now coming to this basket of incentives and disincentives. Now, as Faye, you rightly highlighted, some of the incentives seem to be too good to be true, like how the state of Uttar Pradesh will guarantee admissions in AIIMS and other central institutions is beyond me. And of course, Mr. Taneja will throw light on that aspect. The other incentives are fine, where you give some extra money, you give some
12
extra.
12 months pack leave, Sanjay Ghosh. Have you, as a labor specialist, have you ever heard of 12 months paternity leave?
No. As a matter of fact, see, the fundamental principle, Faye, of labor law is setting out the minimum. So if some state wants to give maximum, good for us, and this is excellent. If they give 12 months, 54 months, which is excellent. And whether they are going to.
So I have a practical question on this 12 months paternity and maternity leave, which means both parents of this baby will get a year off each, fully paid by the government of Uttar Pradesh. Technically, this should happen on your first child. So whether or not you have many children after that, which means that every couple that has their first baby in Uttar Pradesh after this law is passed will get 12 months of maternity and paternity leave. How will you decide my qualification otherwise?
Absolutely. Also, you have to keep in mind, we'll have to see the final contours of how this bill eventually takes the shape of law, and whether this is only for state government jobs in Uttar Pradesh, or they're going to enforce this in the private sector in Uttar Pradesh as well. But I wanted to make a point over here. You see, I just want to quickly deal with these 3 disincentives. Now, unfortunately, there is a regressive judgment of the Supreme Court in 2003 on Javed. There, the Supreme Court upheld a Haryana law which said that if you have 2 children, you can't participate in panchayat elections, which also I think is wrong. It goes against the reproductive rights of women. It goes against the entire concept of dignity and entire concept of liberty. However, see the other disincentives also which you have pointed out. For example, promotion. Now, promotion is based on merit. I don't see how a person who's worked hard in his job, you can deny her promotion saying that she is forced to bear another child by her husband. So this is outrageous, this kind of disincentive. And the other is on subsidy. And I think I couldn't put it more beautifully than Geeta did, that what about the right of the child? The child is not to be blamed. under Indian laws, the moment a child is born, she becomes a citizen of India. It is not her fault that her parents have brought her after 2 children before in that marriage. And you are saying that you're going to deny her ration, you're going to deny her other benefits. So I think I disagree with Ms. Luthra. I think this entire bill is extremely it infringes the fundamental rights of the born and the unborn. And I hope, like the similar wisdom which prevailed upon Uttar Pradesh when during the lockdown they came up with this concept of completely doing away with the industrial disputes laws for 3 years or whatever. I hope this law is also junked by them, and I'm happy that they actually invited public discourse.
So the other challenge here, which our data scientists will tell us, is that every time a two-child policy has been brought in, even in small measure in India, it has led to more unsafe, illegal abortions of girl babies, because these families also feel like, hey, if I only have one option, or if I only have 2 shots at it, I'd rather have boys. Remember, in India, like Poonam Muttreja said on a show we had on Sunday, we don't just prefer boys, we actually don't want girls. And that's an extremely dangerous thing, a route to walk down of. Mr. Taneja, is there a response to the challenges placed before us by Ms. Luthra and Mr. Ghose on the legal front of what this law does? Can you offer us a response?
You see, I just listened to my co-panelist, and listening and learning. I mean, there are many things which are new to me. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not spokesperson of Uttar Pradesh government. And I'm from that state, but I'm not their spokesperson. Now, the point is that, they're looking at it with their own views, and a couple of them are experts on population. So, of course, I respect what they say, and they definitely know these things better than I do. But that said, at the same time, we have to keep in mind here is an elected government, and, and the state parliament, Vidhan Sabha as we call it, I mean, they have to pass the bill. Without that, it will not become a law. So, which means, and their people sitting in that house are elected by the people, and they are lawmakers. They're called lawmakers. So now to say that this will not basically, withstand the scrutiny of Supreme Court and all, I don't know. I'm no expert on these matters. All I know is that UP, yes, there are some positive trends, but that probably before we see the result on the ground may take 15 years and 20 years. Challenges are today. Challenges, unemployment, challenges of, taking care of health of women, educating. It's very easy to say. I'm not saying that they are wrong. I'm saying it's very easy to say, let's invest more in empowering, let's invest more in education. Absolutely, yes. But look at the total budget of Uttar Pradesh government. How many of on my panels know the annual budget of Uttar Pradesh? And how much of that budget, for instance, is spent just on paying salaries? How much of that is their revenue Uttar Pradesh? Compare that with Brazil. Brazil is $1.7 trillion economy. No, look, we're talking numbers. So my point I'm to drive home is that while all that they are saying, I mean, there's tremendous merit. I'm not contesting that. While at the same time, I'm saying we have to look at the challenges. To set up all this, you need resources. You need more. Now, how do we do that? The challenges mainly are between today and let's say coming 15 years. How do we do that? And at the same time, in India, we have a constitution, we have parliament, we have Supreme Court, we have high courts. And if there's anything which is against the law, there's anything which is violating, let's say, the fundamental right of any individual, man, women, child, and all that, of course, that won't pass the muster. It's as simple as that. But here is elected government. They have an idea.
Mr. Taneja, if the situation is really this dire in Uttar Pradesh, why has this government waited for a few months before the next election to bring in this draft bill? Why didn't they start in the beginning when they came into power?
Well, you can always question that. It's like, you get a job for 5 years, and 5 years you look at, for instance, when we moved into power in Uttar Pradesh, the biggest challenge was law and order. It was a huge challenge. So that was a top priority. And that biggest challenge was also, for instance, finding teachers from the school. Because, the challenge was they are building infrastructure, especially in eastern part of the country and Bundelkhand part of the state. So there were many other challenges. If you become chief minister, you may have a different kind of list of priorities, but the chief minister there decided to go this direction. That does mean, you see, I'm not, extra sensitive to that, but there are people in our country who, unfortunately, we're a democratic country, they're entitled to. There are unfortunate people, let me complete. There are people, they just look at politics and they look at, for instance, bias in everything that the chief minister of Uttar Pradesh does just because he looks different. That is unfortunate. In democracy, we need to respect. I don't go by my attire, don't go by my faith. Under the constitution, I'm head of the state and I'm head of the state for everyone, irrespective of your religion. But some people have this bias. Actually, they have bias. That's why they question everything. You do a good job, that's questioned. So that is unfortunate. If you say that is not the case, I'm very sorry, then you don't know the reality on the ground. That is the case. There are millions and millions, including commentators.
If I'm not mistaken, I appreciate the point you're making, Mr. Taneja. If I'm not mistaken, it is the fundamental right and the duty of some citizens, the fundamental right of all citizens, the duty of journalists to question every single thing that every single government does. That's the definition of the job. Irrespective of what the chief minister is wearing, it is our job to question everything. And like you said, some things will be good, some things will be bad. We are entitled to those answers.
Let me answer it. I was a journalist myself, twice editor, and for 17 years bureau chief of one of the largest newspapers on the planet. I know journalism, so please don't teach me journalism. You are absolutely right. A journalist has the right. I agree with you 2000%. No denying that. But when a journalist is also looking at everything, exercising the right, being a bias, that is what is wrong. That's what I'm precisely. Absolutely right. But if you want, I can't name the people, but there are people, they use a certain prism. Just look at their writing. If you say that's not happening in India, then probably you're not talking of the India that I'm talking about. You're talking of some other country.
All right. So coming back then to my India that I'm talking about, are there responses from our panelists? And Ms. Muttreja has to go up first. Go ahead. Poonamji.
I really like what the population issue needs in UP and rest of the country. Actually, Mr. Taneja mentioned in his opening comments, he said, we need population management. And you're so right, sir. There is a total demand and supply failure. The curve is not meeting or it's not crossing. There's a much bigger supply failure than demand failure. There is a demand, sir, but the supply is not there, and it's not UP only. All other places. UP has improved quite a bit in the last 10 years, I would like to say. But having said that, I would like to say that the amount of money I've been part of the population policy in UP. I have done the calculation for the government on how much it will cost to invest more in family planning. We need temporary methods. We need choices for women. We need to reach the doorstep. Sir, it's very little money. And what we spend right now is not even peanuts. It's worse than peanuts. We spend our total budget. We spend only 2.5% of our budget for family planning, which is 4% of the measly 1.5%, or 1.3%, which throughout UPA did not increase. And nor is it increasing. Now it's increased marginally. I would like to say, sir, the money is very little. But if I look at this list of incentives, my God, the state will not be, the entire health budget will go in, family planning budget will go in that. Second, I would like to say, the cost of inaction in not investing in family planning is very high, and I will share a report with you called Cost of Investing in Family Planning, which we have done at the national level with some of the leading demographers and economists, and that shows that the country will benefit, the states will benefit economically, environmentally, but more than anything, it is the families who want to have fewer children, and which is majority families, they will benefit. Second, I would like to say something on elected government and so on. There is a national population policy the government of India has, and those are the principles for the country. We can't have states completely opposing the national population policy, then we need to change the national policy. And finally, I do want to mention that, Ms. Luthra mentioned the PILs. I would like to request you to read the responses of the central government to the PIL, the affidavits they gave. The judge, learned judge, I would like to say here, dismissed the first one in High Court in one hearing. There was so much, the government affidavit was had evidence, data. Well,
Yes.
this, okay, the Supreme Court, again, they went, same people, a member, a lawyer, aapki baradri ke hain lawyer.
Muttreja, Poonam, I'm going to ask everyone to keep the answers slightly shorter so we can get to everybody, because I know that...
okay, then finally, I just want to give one input. I've just read an article before the show started, that 50% of BJP MLAs in UP have more than 3 to 4 children. In any case, I want to, even if they didn't have, and I have no problems, they have more than 3 or 4 children. But how can they sit and legislate a bill for members of parliament which doesn't apply to them, even if they have 2 children? It should equally be applicable to them. And I don't believe we need it. But this is hypocrisy. This is class issue.
Okay. So, yeah, so I'm just going to move through the rest of the panel as well, so we get everybody to get a voice in. Professor Sinha, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to make 3 points. One is that the response to this bill has nothing to do with which government has brought it forward. This debate on incentives and disincentives for population stabilization is a very old one, and many feminist movements, public health experts, Poonam has been part of them, have been talking about this for decades now in our country. And there have been UN conferences where India has been a part, where it has been passed that we will not have this kind of a population policy, which is based on incentives and disincentives. So it is an old debate. Our governments have changed, but we always see this attitude, but this does not work. It's been globally accepted. It's been debated in India. The second point is that the problem with the bill again is that it shows it's very discriminatory in its outlook itself, and it kind of is denying existing inequalities. You already talked about the impact that it could have on sex ratios. If you look at fertility rates by class, it's higher amongst the poor. Why? Because they do not have access to health services. The unmet need for contraceptives is highest amongst the poor. So who is then stopped from contesting in elections or applying for government jobs? Is the poorer, the Dalits, the Adivasi, the groups which have higher fertility rates, which we have to be conscious of. The third is the current problem of having a large population and the supply and demand will not be solved by this. Going back to the first point that we made, population growth is not the problem. We have a large number of people who we are not providing services, but they already exist. And what we have to think about is that how do you provide jobs for the youth that we already have? How do we provide education? How do we provide skills? How do we provide health services? And one cannot escape by saying that there are too many people and we don't have the resources. Even if we look by proportions, by this own government's national health policy, we are supposed to be spending 2.5% of the GDP on health. What progress have we made on that? In the last 6 years, it's remained around 1.1%. So there are so many policies of our government which tell us how much we must be spending on health and education. We are nowhere close to that. So saying no resources is not a solution, and this is not going to solve any of the problems.
So bringing in the lawyers as well, Ms. Luthra, do you have a response to Mr. Taneja's arguments that on one hand, people tend to criticize the state government because of what the chief minister is wearing and what he looks like, as opposed to the fact that he believes that the resources of Uttar Pradesh are stretched right now and the government will do whatever is necessary in order to manage those resources?
So both the arguments, I think, don't really help him. So the first aspect I want to say is that he was very adroit and deft in sidestepping the questions you asked him and addressed an issue. Of course, every state has a problem. Every state has a financial burden. But the question is that we still have to make laws that are progressive. And while we do want a population control, and while India has committed again and again that we want to do it through education and healthcare, as I said, there may be something for saying that there should be disincentives, but look at the larger picture. You yourself said that the skewed sex ratio. What are we doing about the sex ratios in UP, in Haryana, in so many states? We are having the preconception and prenatal diagnostic, that the enactment the PNDT Act, and it is violated. And very few, they find some scapegoats and they catch them. But the very fact that we have this sex ratio, we know that this act is unsuccessful. People want more and more male children, and you're going to face female feticide like this. You're going to have fetuses which are being terminated more than when you have, because anyone who has one girl child feels he's going to have another girl child will somehow go to some unscrupulous doctor, get a test done, and will make sure that that child is terminated because they are so keen to have another child. And you're going to have a lot of illegality taking place, a lot of what I feel would be criminality. So first you have to put your house in order. A disincentive is something which will not result in killing of innocent babies and children. So, or fetuses.
Yes. So let me just bring in. Let me bring in Mr. Sanjoy Ghosh as well. Mr. Ghosh, do you have a rebuttal for Narendra Taneja?
No, I actually wanted to say something which Dipa ji has already said before me, but let me connect it with the law. Dipa ji has said, and this is the correct position, that there is a correlation between economic backwardness and social and educational backwardness and population. So you always have people from the minorities, from the Dalits, Adivasis who are having more children because of their social and economic and educational backwardness. So what you'll have with this kind of draconian law is that it will impact more, it'll impact more and more disadvantageously on this section of people, and therefore it will fall foul of the guarantee under Article 14, which requires everyone to be treated equally. So this is the legal challenge which I am expecting will be on this, if this becomes law, that this impacts different people differently and has greater impact on the poor, on the disadvantaged and the minorities. And they are the ones who are seeking jobs, they are the ones who are seeking health, etc. But another issue, I mean, let's not be very, very happy that this is happening in the back of beyond in Uttar Pradesh. As far as I am told from news reports, that there is one particular MP, Member of Parliament from Uttar Pradesh, with more than 3 children, who is introducing a private member's bill when the monsoon session of Parliament commences on similar lines. So you're going to have it nationally.
Yes, and we've seen a pattern where other state governments also say, oh, this is a good idea. This is what happened with the love jihad. They're putting it in inverted commas. The love jihad law, where basically they turned around and other states adopted whatever Uttar Pradesh had done to begin with. I just want to quote Justice Sekhri of the Supreme Court from a case in 2017, where he was talking about reproductive rights, where he said a woman's choice to reproduce, abort, or prevent pregnancy deals with her body. It is she who, by virtue of her anatomy, undergoes the process eventually. It is her body, it is her right, the choice should be hers. Does a law like this strip away that right from a woman to choose for herself what she wants to do? Sanjoy Ghosh first.
Yes, absolutely, Faye. I am not only will this law act differently on different sections of people, this will also operate differently on females and males. We already know the difference in the power equation between men and women in this country, especially in a backward state like Uttar Pradesh. And this is a case where you're not empowering the woman with her control over her reproductive rights. And you are going to subject her to so many disqualifications and so many legal liabilities. Obviously, this is going to encourage, and as Geeta ji said, this will make her more vulnerable to sex selection, more vulnerable to feticide and infanticide. And I hope the government sees the light of the day and withdraws this kind of action. Because the solution is education. The solution is empowerment. The solution is voluntary compliance. This kind, and yes, incentives maybe. No one is coming in.
Sanjay, I'm smiling because do you hope the government withdraws this before or after the election?
No, I don't see the government passing this law. But yes, we have been surprised earlier also. I am sure once there is legal opinion which is obtained by them about certain draconian aspects and certain impossible aspects of this draft, I am sure a better sense will prevail. But however, we are seeing that this seems to be the latest position, where you have governments all the way from Assam to Karnataka who have now started enacting such bills. I don't want to comment on the political objectives or the political talking points which will be given to the party in power when they bring such bills. But legally and constitutionally, this is an absolute no-no, and it will also make us a laughing stock in the eyes of the world. We are not China, and therefore we should not even dream to be like China in population control. You want to be China, get the economic development first.
Okay, let me take this all back to Mr. Taneja. Mr. Taneja, from the arguments that all of our guests have unanimously, and you must appreciate that they're from different walks of life and they bring in different points of view, that this will be discriminatory towards the poor. So there will be an economic discrimination. This will be discriminatory towards members of the Dalit community, members of the tribal community, members of the oppressed castes. It will be discriminatory in a gender sense towards women and baby girls. Also, this flies against the Indian government's national standpoint on how to handle population and the Indian government's commitments to the world on how to handle population. So will then the BJP's national leadership advise its government in Uttar Pradesh that there is absolutely no standing to a bill like this? We're embarrassing ourselves globally.
Yeah, well, I have listened very carefully, and I think very interesting points made by Geeta ji and Poonam ji, and very interesting. Some points are like, quite new for me, and they, they'll spend a lot of time studying these things. They're experts on these fields and all that. But all I'm trying to say is that, when you look at Uttar Pradesh, look at Western Uttar Pradesh, economically, socially, culturally is more advanced than, let's say, eastern part of Uttar Pradesh. When you look at the central part of Uttar Pradesh, that's quite different. Southern part of Uttar Pradesh, Jhansi and all that, quite different. Uttar Pradesh is one state, but when you look at the challenges, quite different from region to region. There are at least 4 broadly are the regions. And therefore, I think, when the government has put this on the table for a debate, and the fact that we are discussing it and debating it, I think that's a very, very good sign. Maybe something good comes out of your debate. I'm sure that there are other channels discussing the same thing. That's what the democracy is all about. So all I'm saying is to reach to this conclusion that, look, this is political, there is a hidden political agenda and so on and so forth. That is sickening. That must be avoided. Then
okay.
when
so
those
Mr. Taneja, you don't agree with the point of view right now that by putting this bill forward, the government is suggesting that population is a serious problem in Uttar Pradesh, whereas Ms. Muttreja just pointed out that the numbers suggest otherwise, that it's not as serious as it used to be. 2, the fact that this is particularly because of one particular community, which also we understand from data is not true. And that this is the priority at a time when we are going, let's be honest, from second wave to third wave. Uttar Pradesh worst hit in the country. We've had horror stories of what has happened. We've had bodies being flung in the river. There are many, many things for the government to be tackling at this point. To suggest that this is the issue of priority, do you think that may be misleading?
So don't say this is the issue, the priority. There are many other priorities. This is one of them. You see, as you know, you deal with the challenges of a state like Uttar Pradesh, huge population, vast area, and extremely complex issues there. It's not the issue that's the only issue in the government is forgotten about other things. No such thing. But at the end of the day, for instance, the people of Uttar Pradesh, and ask anyone who's from Uttar Pradesh, people of Uttar Pradesh are politically very mature, very sophisticated. Trust me, you may not buy it, more sophisticated politically than your home city, Bombay, much more. So they know it. If you are trying to do something which is kind of, nasty, people of Uttar Pradesh are not going to support it. And we know that. As a political party on the ground, we know that. So it's nothing to do with that. If some people are suggesting it's against this community, that community, and so on and so forth. Uttar Pradesh is the birthplace of Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb. You see, my son is a Muslim name, and I'm a Hindu. And I'm from Uttar Pradesh. So don't use one prism every time and look at everything from that prism. That's not healthy. All I'm saying, it's not healthy for anyone who does that. Point here is that, as I said, very interesting ideas, some good analysis done by my co-panelists here. I'm sure the debate is happening in other parts of Uttar Pradesh also, and the nation also. This is how democracy functions. If there is some merit in any point made by your co-panelists here, or by those other in the court, those by other, in democracy, you incorporate them. But the point is to say that population management is not an issue in Uttar Pradesh, population is not a challenge. I think that is not true. Then anybody who says that knows nothing about Uttar Pradesh. This government has been elected by the people, and that's the way they want to look at it. Tomorrow, if there is another political party or my co-panelists one of them becomes chief minister, they want to look at differently. I will respect that also.
Okay, so I agree with you, Mr.
What the
Taneja.
people want.
I agree with you, Mr. Taneja, that the people of Uttar Pradesh are far more politically astute than almost anywhere else in the country.
I hope Mr. Taneja knows that Uttar Pradesh already had one Bengali chief minister, Sucheta Kriplani. So I would be the second one if Mr. Taneja is so hoping for me.
Well, best of luck to you. You will, best of luck. Try that. It's beautiful. And I hope to see a Uttar Pradesh wala chief minister of West Bengal. That will be great India. If that happens, that will be great India. I wish to see that.
This is, I didn't expect Narendra
That will never happen. It can happen only in Uttar Pradesh. Just a minute, give me 1 minute. What he said is beautiful because this can happen only in Uttar Pradesh. Uttar Pradesh state with a big heart of a tiger. Look at what happened in West Bengal. Let them have a non-Bengali as chief minister. I'll be happy to debate with him.
All right, I'm going to take one rebuttal to Mr. Taneja's arguments defending the moves of the Uttar Pradesh government. My concern, like I said, is that we have a limited healthcare budget. There is a limited amount of resources and mind space within the health departments of all of our states. And if the health department is drawing up a policy at this point, should it be about COVID and oxygen and children and wards and containment centers, or should it be about this bill that we're looking at right now? One rebuttal from any of the other panelists. Just raise your hand if you want to come in. Dipa ji, go ahead.
Just want to echo what you're saying, that at this time, the priority would be strengthening the primary health system, which would be a response to COVID, which would be a response to high infant mortality, which would be a response to high fertility rates if we think that's a problem, which would be a response to all the health problems. So strengthening the primary health centers, the sub-centers, the outreach programs, the ASHA workers, giving them more resources, that should have been the priority.
Right. Sanjoy Ghose, I'll give you the last word. On the labor front, we are also at a point right now where we are facing an unprecedented labor crisis in terms of jobs lost. This, of course, I must accept, deals specifically with government employees. But do you think it just adds more confusion and fear to a system where people are already afraid for their jobs and afraid for their futures?
Absolutely, Faye, as you rightly said, that it'll, as with everything, the brunt of this legislation, this misadventure will be felt by the poorer sections and the weaker sections, because they are the ones who are out for a government job, or even if let's also understand, traditionally, Uttar Pradesh doesn't mean only the government departments. There are several state public sector undertakings and factories and sugar mills run by the state of Uttar Pradesh. So they also employ people. They also employ these poor people. And if they are going to extend this policy lock, stock and barrel, we are going to see a lot of people being deprived of public employment, deprived of an opportunity to better their lives, only because the state did not spend enough money to educate them and to bring them out of poverty, bring them out of this kind of lack of control over their reproductive rights.
Right. I want to thank my panelists for making time to speak with us this evening. For our audience, each argument was very sound and very important. If you do have time to scrub back and listen to each argument individually, please do so. It's really important, because a bill like this one, if it is turned into a law, will be disadvantageous to women, to girls, to members of oppressed castes, to the Dalit community, to the tribal community, to the poor people. So everybody who is already struggling with
right to health
more. And that is actually really scary. So it's something that you should spend time reading about. You should spend time understanding, because you never know, your state government might suggest it next. And at that point, it would be good to be armed with the right arguments. I also echo Narendra Taneja's sentiments that hopefully we will have more Bengali chief ministers in Uttar Pradesh, more Uttar Pradesh chief ministers in Bengal. Why not? It's a free country. On that note, thank you all for joining us. Remember, the news is coming up at 9 o'clock, where we put out the news. No opinion whatsoever, old school Doordarshan style, just the news is at 9 o'clock this evening. Take a look at it. Thanks for watching. Good night.